without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Odessa's mayor, Mr. Justin Murry.
Thank you, Amy. I'd like to also thank ODPRO for setting this up and everyone for attending. Amy called me, it's been a few months back when she was trying to set this up, and they said they were trying to get community involvement. And at that time, I was constantly asking at Alderman meetings for people to volunteer to get on board. We need people for planning and zoning, we need people for this board, that board. And so she asked me to come and speak to you to give you some information on the different boards, because not everybody understands what those boards do, or how to get on them, or how they operate, or even that some of these boards even exist. So I wanted to come here tonight and just kind of speak to you about each of these boards. The first one that I wanted to talk about is actually called the Board of Appeals. It's more of the obscure board. You don't really hear of it much because it very seldom ever meets. The Board of Appeals is in Chapter 7 of our General Code. It actually deals with the Community Development Code. So all of your codes enforcement, getting your licenses for buildings and doing that. If for some reason you're working on a project and you get told by your codes enforcement officer that you can't do that, well, but when you look at the code, you read it differently. So you think there's been a misjudgment or a misclassification or relative to how that code reads. And so you can actually then go and provide an appeal to the Board of Appeals. And they will then look at the situation, look at the case, and determine if that codes enforcement person actually abided by the actual definition of that law. They can't actually change a law and say, well, yeah, I see what you're saying, let's go ahead and allow you to do this in this case. They can't write code. They only make sure that we are interpreting the code correctly. So you do have that option to be able to do that. It's really over licenses in subsection A and over the International Building Codes in subsection B of Chapter 7. So that is the Board of Appeals. And it is a 5-year term, and it's a 5-member board that only meets when there is an appeal. So I don't think we've had an appeal for multiple years at this point, so that board has not met. The other board that is somewhat obscure that doesn't meet regularly, though it actually did in the last month or so, is the Board of Adjustments. It's very similar to the Board of Appeals, other than it deals with zoning. So it's in Chapter 8 in our zoning regulations. If there is an issue with how something is zoned, or actually if you want a variance to the zone, it's hindering how you can use your property. You can actually go and have request a variance to that zoning. You can't ask for it to be rezoned. It's not a land use permit change. So you can't say, well, it's R1, you want your little spot to be zoned, commercial. You can't do that. It's not for that. And actually, I'll just read exactly what the powers of the Board of Adjustment. They have powers relative to interpretations. So similar to how the Board of Appeals works, if there is a misinterpretation you feel is being done on your zoning issue, you can take it to the Board of Appeals. There's also powers relative to special exceptions. Special exceptions, we like those. There are 2 different special exceptions to permit the extension of a district. So you say you have R1 butted up to commercial, but yet where that boundary is, after things have been reformed or purchases with land, it splits a boundary. So you've got a lot, half of that lot is actually zoned R1, the other half is zoned R3, let's say, just for discussion purposes. This is actually, you can go to them to get that entire lot included within that one zone. So that way you don't have 2 different zoning regulations for each half of your lot. They also interpret provisions of the ordinance where street layouts may be off. So on a map, it shows that your street runs in a position on your property, but in reality, it's not truly there. That street's not where it says it is on the map. So there's actually a difference between what's zoned and what is reality. So then you can go to the Board of Adjustments to get that taken care of and make sure that your property is zoned truly the way it is. And then the last one, which is the one that is mostly used, is the variances. Again, this is one we discussed a while ago, and was the last case that came to the Board of Adjustments on its 9th Street Terrace. I believe that's the name of the road is 9th Street Terrace. And there was a use for a land that they wanted to discuss at the end of that street, and it came to the Board of Adjustments on an appeal. To file an appeal to the Board of Adjustments, you must go into the City Hall and pay a $15 filing fee with the city clerk, and then at that point in time, we will set that up with the Board of Adjustments. And it's based off of a decision made by the building inspector. So there has to be a decision made by the building inspector on something you're wanting to do with your property that you disagree with. When that decision is made by the building inspector, you have 30 days to file with the Board of Adjustments. If you do not file within the 30 days of that decision is upheld, and you are no longer able to file that appeal to the Board of Adjustments. So just keep that in mind. There is some contingencies there that you have to meet to be able to file. It is also a 5-member board that is for 5 years of appointment. Now, those are the 2 boards that are more obscure that people may have not even known about